Welcome to Wellthy Living Conversations. I'm Lisa, your host and founder of Wellthy Living. It's here that I have conversations with a variety of people to have inspiring and insightful conversations to help you live a meaningful, connected and well life, both personally and professionally. My guest today is Nina, let me say this right, Hjortlund. If I'm wrong, I'll
almost
say what it is.
Hjortlund.
Certainly,
yeah.
And she certainly lives a meaningful, connected and well life, both personally and professionally. And today's episode, we're going to talk about some of the ways she does this by sharing her story and insights, which are both admirable and inspirational. So welcome, Nina.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to being here. Thanks for having me.
So wonderful to have you. So let me tell you a bit about Nina. Nina is an absolute powerhouse when it comes to generosity of spirit and giving back, creating positive change in the lives of the vulnerable. Her dedication, passion and enthusiasm drives her entrepreneurial personality, and she's a believer in creating opportunities rather than waiting for them. Nina is a single mother of 4, 3 of which are neurodiverse. Founding director and CEO of non-for-profit Australia for Cedar Tanzania, funding projects in rural Tanzania, and Artefactz supporting African women, and also is currently undertaking a MicroMasters at Queensland University in leadership in global development. So before we get into today's conversation, I just want to acknowledge that this week is Neurodiversity Awareness Week. And as Nina has 2 children living with ADHD and 1 living with OCD and severe anxiety disorder, I'd like to chat with her about her experiences later in the episode. So I came across Nina on Clubhouse recently, and for those who don't know, Clubhouse is a new app where you have a lot of audio conversations around a whole lot of topics. And when I came across Nina sharing about some of the work that she's doing as well as her experience in motherhood, I felt completely drawn to her and immediately wanted to bring her on the show. So it's really exciting to have Nina here today, and welcome again.
Thank you. It's really an honor to be here, and it's so lovely to actually see you. I've heard you on Clubhouse, I've heard your voice, but it's fantastic now also to put a face to the voice.
I know, so nice. So if you could maybe just start by just telling us a little bit about your background and about your work.
Sure. So as you can all hear, I'm not Australian. I originally come from Denmark in Europe, where I was born. And lived there for the first 30 years of my life, although traveling around in Europe. I then ended up going on a holiday to Tanzania in East Africa. So it was actually a present for my 30th birthday, and I went there, and that was the beginning to the rest of my life, really, because I ended up staying there for the next 13 years. So it was quite a holiday, you can say. And then in 2018, in the middle of 2018, I then relocated here to Australia. So I now live in Perth in Western Australia.
Amazing. So what an adventure. I mean, I know so many people who have gone, all right, I'm just going to go and travel for 6 months, broaden my horizons, learn something new, and then 10, 12, I've got some best friends, 20 years later, still living abroad.
Yeah, it was absolutely not in the cards that I was going to live in Tanzania, but I guess I was ready for adventure in my life. I felt stuck where I was, and it was an opportunity for me to change where I felt I was stuck.
Yeah, fantastic. So you became you're now the founding director of and a CEO of Australia for Cedar Tanzania, and also for Artefactz. Where did that come about, and what sort of core projects are you involved in with that?
So while I was in Tanzania, obviously you can't not see some of the issues that are very present in a third world country. Poverty is is right there in your face, how people struggle with daily life, with getting water, getting proper health care and so forth. So while I was there, I connected with a few people who were on the same mission. And they started out by doing a baseline survey in one area, and we settled in one area. And we started out building a hospital because they had no access to healthcare. So we have actually constructed a hospital that we now run, and we provide training for Tanzanian doctors, and we do outreach service for people with disabilities and work with the stigma surrounding disabilities. And we work with a lot of other projects because our take is we have a very holistic approach, because we can't just go in and fix one problem without taking into account other issues as well, because we are humans and communities are a whole entity. So if you fix healthcare but you don't do anything about education, or you go in and for example, we give medication for healthcare for diarrhea, but we don't treat the water issue. It's all connected to each other. And that's why we work very holistically with entrepreneurship, education, community empowerment, and healthcare all together. Sorry, you were asking about Artefactz as well. I was just trying to remember everything you asked about.
No, but we won't go to Artefactz yet. So with those projects, I mean, that's amazing. I mean, the fact that it's true, you go to these countries and you see so much happening, and it breaks your heart a lot of the time when you're in those third world countries. And if you're so inclined, you feel like, well, what can I do and how can I help? So I'm wondering, like, you're in these countries, it's not that easy to always get involved on the ground in projects. So how did you go about doing that?
Oh, absolutely not. And often you stand there and you're just overwhelmed. Where do you start? What do you do? And you absolutely can't help everyone. And that's where I think coming in, because I've run businesses before, and having the ability to set up a plan and project development and figuring out, so this is what we set out to do, and this is our limitations, this is what we can't do, but we can do this, and using that as a framework to start with, because you can't go out and say, oh, I want to save the world, because then you're bound to lose or to lose track of what you actually want to achieve. But by actually putting some parameters and to say, these are the things I can do right now, and these are the things that I cannot do anything about right now. Maybe in the future, it doesn't mean that we can't do those later on, but putting a solid framework to start with, I think narrows down what you're setting out to do and setting you on the right path and making it less overwhelming.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, the planning is amazing. And I'm also just wondering how you, how did you go from seeing the work and seeing that you wanted to get involved to obviously being in there and, utilising your amazing business skills to help them with the planning of the projects? What that in-between phase, how did you go? Like, if someone else was wanting to get involved in some of this work, how do you approach these organisations? I mean, they must have people approaching them all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I started out volunteering my time and in areas where I felt I was really confident and comfortable that I could do. And then from there, it grew and my responsibility grew. But it's also about not being shy to offer to take on responsibility when you feel you're ready. It's like, no, I can do this job, or I'm ready to learn about this. I will go and do a course online or something like that. And then step by step, taking on the responsibility, taking the initiative to doing things. For example, when I did come to Australia, it was my initiative to be the founding director and to set up an entity here in Australia to be able to expand, where we can seek for grants, where we can approach companies and to expand from here, because now our entity in Tanzania has been on the ground for nearly 7 years. They are fully capable of doing the work on their own. So I can do the strategic development from here and the strategic planning for the overall planning of our entity and for the people on the ground. So it's also about do the capacity building for that and see the right time when it's time to go somewhere else and let them shine.
Yeah, amazing. So when you were speaking about the projects before, you said that you really look at it from a holistic point of view. So you're looking at, not just the issue at hand, but what is the core issue that might be causing that issue, et cetera, and having a really integrated model, which is perfect, which is what is necessary. When you've done that, are there themes that come out that have a particular area, whether it be education or another area, which sort of affects everything? Like, is there a core issue which can have the greatest impact on all the other problem areas?
Both yes and no. For a long period of time, I was sure in my mind that education is the answer to everything.
Yeah.
Better education, longer education. But I feel I'm slightly shifting my perception as I dive deeper and deeper into this. Because, for example, as I see in a lot of third world countries, whether it's in Africa or in Southeast Asia, there's a lot of issues about water. And because I took a course, for example, also at MIT about the economics of poverty, because if you don't have clean water, you often get parasites and worms and everything else in your belly. When you have all of these things in your belly, it's hard to go and study when you also have to have very limited nutrition. So your body has to fight both the worms and the parasites and then share the scarce nutrition with those worms and parasites. There's not much capacity left in your head to learn. So to be able to eradicate those, for example, there's deworming tablets that cost less than $1 per year per child to treat. Wow. And if you can then treat that, there's actually been research done that these children, if they got treatment for 2 years, so an investment of $2 per child, would give them $200 extra earning capacity for each year for the rest of their life.
Wow.
I know, it's amazing. I'm not 100% sure how they can measure this, but they've followed some children for years and years and years in sub-Saharan Africa, and they could see a very distinct difference in their earning capacity and correlate that back to whether or not they receive deworming tablets for 2 years. So for me to be able to create clean water that has no parasites, no worms, for example, diarrhea is the biggest killer of under fives in sub-Saharan Africa. Something simple, and that comes from contaminated water, and it comes from then they get dehydrated, and the only water that the mother has to give them is the contaminated water, worsening the diarrhea, and it's just this vicious circle that they end up in. So for me, yes, education is really important, but it also comes together with clean water and proper healthcare on the other end. So it's really hard to take them all apart.
Wow, just listening to you say that, like, I feel, I don't know, like it's heartbreaking, and it's heartbreaking that these things that we just in first world countries just take so for granted. And,
absolutely.
That we've got, even in this global picture, that we've even got this problem, like $1 a day per child, and we have this issue. I mean, it's mind-blowing and
absolutely
heartbreaking, that we've got this problem. And I've heard that before. I have a number of people I know that run projects to support projects in Africa, and a lot of them are centered around water because it is such a problem. And it just seems crazy, isn't it, that you think, oh, they don't have clean water to drink, but if you start going, well, what does that actually mean? And just think that then causes diarrhea, which then causes these major illnesses under 5. I mean, that's just so hard to stomach, to think of that.
Another fact from Tanzania is a third of every child, so 1 in 3 children are living with something called stunted. So when you're stunted, it means that your body has not developed or had a chance to develop as a normal child because of prolonged infections, to have malnutrition because the food is very one-sided, because they're living in poverty on less than $1.90 a day. and then because they can't get medical treatment or being dewormed. And that means that their brains are not developing as other children, their bodies, their organs are not developing as other children. They don't grow as big and fast as other children. And it's you know, if you're stunted, you can't return that back. You can prevent it to happen, because you can make sure that they get deworming tablets and clean water and a nutrition diet, but you can't it's not reversal to do this. And that's, imagine, you know, I have 4 children, so that would be, well, 1 and a bit of my children that just because I didn't feed them proper enough, or I didn't have access to water in my tap.
Yeah, it's full on, and it's, you know, it's hard to break that cycle for them, because if you
Absolutely.
continue in that poverty cycle, it's a poverty cycle that's just so hard to break when it really comes down to their basic health. So why, I mean, apart from the obvious humanity, reasons, and the fact that we're all humans in this world and everybody's lives matter, in that respect, like, why is global development so important for all of us? Like, if we're sitting here in a first world country, why do you think it's so important for all of us?
Well, now it becomes even more evident now that we are sitting in the middle of a pandemic, and a country like Tanzania, who doesn't have the resources or the political will, or in any way has the amenities that we do to contain COVID-19, or to vaccinate for COVID-19, or in any other way, make sure that they are administering the virus as well as anyone else. It's also in our interest here in Australia, for example, that Tanzania does what it can to prevent COVID-19. Otherwise, we will have other mutations or other strains of the virus who might be resistant to the vaccine that we are now all working in the world to get and to protect ourselves with. So that is one reason where it becomes very much alive and present for us day to day here. Another reason, which I find very compelling, and that I often talk about, is, for example, Australia is a very proactive country in mining industry, for example. And at the moment, I haven't checked in the last, 6 months or so, but there were 140 ASX listed companies working on the African continent. And, I have nothing against the mining industry. In fact, we have several mining companies on our CSR portfolio. But for me to see, so they're working in Africa, so which means that we have Australian workers working on the African continent within the mining industry. It's in the interest of both the Australian government and the Australian companies to protect the Australian workers, and they always want to lobby to have bilateral agreements. Mm-hmm. Bilateral agreements does not happen unless you also give something else with the other hand, and you do something good, and you promote the cultural understanding between, for example, Australia and whatever country they're working in. And that's where helping a non-for-profit or working together in a CSR program with a non-for-profit can assist that. And they can create the way or the pathway to create bilateral agreements between countries as well. So in that sense, it becomes a part of a much bigger picture that benefits a whole lot more people, that then it's just about helping that man on the street, or we just do it because out of our good heart. It has a much bigger political picture as well, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad you shared all that, because it's really important. And I think that a lot of people, when they stop and think about it, of course they might think and realise that it has a lot more bigger impact, and there's, political impact as well as spread of infection globally, which we're obviously experiencing at this time with COVID-19. But, it's really important, I think, that when a lot of people don't sit and stop and really think about that impact. So I'm so glad that you shared all that information. what do you think that we're heading to now? Like, do you think that we're moving along the pathway where there is a lot more bilateral agreements, or do you think that we are still, I mean, we obviously still have a long way to go, but do you think that we've moved in the direction in a positive way, like, or do you think we're still quite stunted?
I hope this will be the outcome of this pandemic, that at least something positive will come out of it in the other end. I have experienced, like in the first year of this pandemic, people and nations, and rightly so, look within, and everybody became very small. It's like, okay, we need to protect our borders, we need to protect our people, we need to protect our backyard, and it's all really scary, and everybody closed in on themselves. But now, I think as we start to vaccinate, we are realizing it becomes a much broader picture, and we all need to be together in this, and we all need to vaccinate, and we all need to help each other to vaccinate our people. And we need to share some of these goods that we have, because a lot of the Western world has, vaccines to vaccinate their nations 3 times over, whereas the African continent has only secured, I think it's enough vaccines to vaccinate 35% of the population on the African continent, which is far from enough. And therefore, it is the responsibility of those nations who has extra vaccines to share some of those. And to me, that then comes again, later on, after we then vaccinate on the other side of COVID-19, that we can again share some of that wealth or share some of the knowledge. Because to me, it's not only about the bag of money, it's also about capacity building, to share knowledge, to share expertise, which is something I work, for example, also with our CSR companies, that, for example, an accountant can, instead of bag of money, an accountant can spend an hour every week to capacity build, to teach the Tanzanian accountant to have a professional conversation every week about, so how do you handle this problem, or how do you handle this, and have you remembered to enter this into the system? That is much more valuable than just giving a bag of money to upgrade his accounting system, for example, because that knowledge will remain within the community and can be shared within the community.
Yeah, so good. So many great suggestions there. And, it really is a global issue. And it's wonderful, having people like you to share that information, as well as obviously be so active in creating change. So I really applaud you for all the work that you're doing. And I think it's so inspirational. And hopefully you've given a few people some ideas and things that they can then, sort of inquire or spark some insight to go and then look at ways that they can maybe get involved as well. I also want to talk about within the third world countries. I suppose we're in our own country now. The hot topic is around women and women's safety and abuse of women and the amount of rape that happens every day. But this is been going on and is rampant in a lot of third world countries. I mean, the inequality, gender-based inequality, is another level in third world countries.
Yes. We have some very patriarchal communities and ways of seeing life. So that is something that we have been working on as well. Not that we have gone in to say how people should change their lives or they have to live like we live life, but we have provided information about what are the benefits, for example, of having equality at home. What is the benefits of equity in society? And through that work, we have gained a range of community activists. So it's people from within the communities that we are working with who have put their hand up and said, like, no, I believe in what you say, I would like to know more. So these community activists, they have been given a lot of information, and they then go out and speak to their fellow villagers about the benefits and starting conversations about, so how are other ways we can problem solve at home than to use violence? How can we benefit if we allow our wives to do other things as well? How can we benefit if we are helping out with the housework? So they're starting conversations. They are, people are allowed to say, he's like, no, I don't believe in that. But to open up for the dialogue has been really interesting. And now, after having worked within that field for 4 years, we have been implementing this program in there we work, and we can now see behavioral changes and things like even the local police station has now a gender desk. So people that has gender-based issues can now go to a dedicated police officer, and that is not from our doing. That is from the government, that is from the local police, and it's by demand of the society and the communities that they have now set that up. So we can now see ripples in the water that is slowly changing.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I mean, it's so good to see progress in those areas. And obviously there is progress, but it's just so interesting that the fact that you can report and they've got a space that they can go to within the police station to report, and that's progress, that's massive, that's
absolutely
change. Just the fact that something we take for granted like that, I mean, we're in a situation whereby, you know, we've got a political problem when a girl didn't report it to the police, and how that wasn't okay, and how the people that knew about it didn't report to the police, and what issues that's causing because she didn't. And in third world countries, we're talking about, or in Africa particularly, you're talking about how just the fact that there's somewhere to report is the biggest change.
Yes,
it's
absolutely.
Like we're not in the same world.
Yeah, no, it's definitely very, very different, and it's different parameters. It doesn't make the problems here in Australia that they don't exist. You know, having compassion and seeing something that is different in another part of the world doesn't negate your own hardship. So that hardship is real and big and massive as well. But, you know, acknowledging that somebody else has another problem doesn't negate your own.
Oh, absolutely. And that goes across the board of whether it's a tiny little thing or it's something bigger, and that's not even going across borders. That's a conversation also about just in your work life, in your personal life, in all lives, in your physical health and your mental and your psychological health. There is sometimes a problem that people can have this, I suppose, almost toxic positivity about it when you put it in perspective of somebody else, and then, you know, don't shun down how you're feeling, which is, I suppose, another form of gaslighting, really.
And actually, like we were talking earlier before we started this about relationships, and often, you know, in relationships, so you see the one partner is like, oh, I do it really, really hard because I work hard, and the other one, I do it even harder because I have the kids all the time. And it becomes a competition about who does it harder, instead of saying, showing compassion. It's like, oh, I'm really sorry you have to work that hard, or I'm sorry that you have the kids all the time and you feel that is hard. That doesn't negate my hardship. You know, to be able to, I can still own that I find this hard. At the same time, I can feel compassion for somebody else. To me, that is such an important mindset and skill to teach my children, for example.
Yeah.
It's just such a basic thing to be aware of within ourselves, that just because I care about something else doesn't mean that anything goes away from me.
Yeah. And I mean, an extension of that is also just looking at how everybody defines success in different ways. And just because my idea of success might be different to yours or anybody else's, my goal is to honor my own success and follow what I believe is important, but also be able to honor somebody else's path and their choices as well, even if they're different than mine.
Absolutely. It's about having an outlook on life that is just slightly bigger than yourself, and be able to see other people for who they are and what they are and what is happening in their lives, without letting any of your paths, you know, walk over that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've gone a little bit sideways, which is all good because I love doing that and let the conversation flow wherever it goes. But if I do come back to your work in Africa, one of the things when I said to talk about your work was also your other non-for-profit, which is Artefactz. Is that what? Yep. And so if you can just tell everyone a little bit about that.
Yes, so Artefactz came about actually in March last year, when we were all, you know, had to pivot and all have to find out other ways of doing business and doing things. So one thing for us as a non-profit world was, of course, we could anticipate that a lot of grants would not be available. Companies would sit tighter on their funding. A lot of things would have to change. So we try to figure out what can we do so we can be much more sustainable by ourselves, and which ways can we do this in. So what we have done is, like, there's a lot of really talented and amazing women in East Africa who does a lot of handcrafted work. So it's often the women, for example, that sit and weaves baskets, and different tribes has different styles and different areas in East Africa, because it depends on what kind of reeds or what kind of grasses are growing in that area and the traditions. And like in Tanzania alone, I think there's over 200 different tribes. So they all have different cultural traditions. So because I've lived there for so many years, and through other people as well, we have been out speaking to the different groups and purchased directly from them, because they lost all their income through tourism declining, because that was their natural market where to sell a lot of these things. So we buy up directly from them, and import it here to Australia, and then we sell it online, and all the proceeds go back into our community projects. So it's all one big circle. You know, it's not aid work necessarily to the artisans. They're getting paid for a skill that they can then teach their children, because it's skills that go from woman to woman to woman, you know, through generations. So we are sustaining their lives, sustaining that they can send their girls to school, sustaining that they can access healthcare, sustaining that they can, you know, continue a life and feed their children, plus, you know, everything extra is going back to all our community work. So in that sense, you know, it's just another income generating activity that will support all our projects.
Yeah, brilliant. And you've really highlighted why supporting women in third world countries matters, because it's not just about you know, buying that beautiful item of jewelry or a woven basket or something that the woman in that country has made, and for her then to be able to feed her family. It's so much more than that. And I think you've really highlighted the ripple effect of buying things off women in third world countries, and how their craft, especially the artisan stuff, and their craft is passed down, which then allows the income generation to go from generation to generation to generation, as well as what that actually means being able to get those worming tablets, being able to have that education, all of these things that then get filtered into the community, because we know that in third world countries, the community aspect, the connection aspect, the tribal aspect is so strong, much stronger than it is in first world countries. And we know how much everything's shared within community there. So it has that greater impact because of that tribal community mentality.
Absolutely. You never get to pass somebody on the street in Tanzania who has even a small bowl of beans without being invited in, like, come share my food. And it's like that kind of so I even get goosebumps, because it's just welcoming. It's genuinely meant. And they would be happy to sit down and share it and have a conversation about life and what's going on. And it's just such a beautiful, beautiful way of living.
Yeah, I'm sure. And I'm sure that was probably one of the things that drew you to stay from this short trip to 13 years. You know, it's beautiful when you can go to an environment and that feeling of belonging, community. And yes, it has its pitfalls, and yes, it's hygiene and health, and has major issues there, and it has major issues in gender equality. And a lot of the systemic problems are real. But the aspect of community and connection and tribe, and honouring land and honouring each other in that respect, is something that I think we can learn a lot from.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, through my 13 years, I mean, I have learned so much about myself during my time there. I've learned what are my values, what is important to me. I have learned a lot about myself during my time in Tanzania.
Yeah,
So
that's brilliant. And, you know, because I don't know if, you know, we haven't had a lot of conversations because we've just met briefly on Clubhouse, but that's what my whole business is about. It's about connection and connection to self and really getting to know yourself and your values so that you can then make decisions about your actions and what you do in your life that brings you meaning, that brings you connection, that brings you well-being, and then, you know, enables you to connect to others doing that and connect to the world around us. So I think that everything that we do and all the action we take just gives us that extra bit of information about ourselves so that we can make these decisions that bring about so much change.
yeah, because I believe if you don't live according to your values, you're tying yourself in a knot, and you're you're ending up living a very unhappy life or unaligned life, or however you want to phrase it. But because your values are there, no matter what you do, it's just whether you choose to quieten them down or you're living according to them.
Absolutely. And I think that it's about the experiences that we have in order to both the quiet time, reflection time, as well as being out there in life, so that then we can go, well, did I like that? Didn't I like that? How did that feel with me? Did it bring a spark? If it brought a spark, that's an indication that it's something that's really important to you. So I think that being out in the environment and living life, not just doing personal development in a training, but, you know, doing that and then having some self-reflection really gives you a lot more knowledge about yourself and your values to then, you know, bring about creative change and sustainable success and sustainable well-being. Like you said, if you're not aligned to those things, it's very hard to have sustainable well-being in your life.
Absolutely.
So I was going to say, if we are talking about sustainable success, I want to talk a little bit about non-for-profits, because when I read stuff about what you do, something really stood out for me, and that's your perspective of what it means to have a non-for-profit, because a lot of people think a non-for-profit means no profit. And when I read what you wrote, you said that you advocate for, you know, non-for-profits, and that that you want them to be led and seen as a business, as we're not in the game to make no profits, but to utilise profits to create sustainable and long-lasting change in the world. Yes. So I want you to talk us through that, because I think a lot of people, it's a common misconception for people with regard to non-for-profits.
Absolutely, because I think a lot of non-profits are run with people with the heart in the right place, and a lot of non-profits are run with emotions, which should also be that. You know, a lot of businesses should be run with passion and drive, but that doesn't negate that we also have to make money. I think because non-profits has to earn money just like any other business. The difference is what we do with the money. In a non-profit, we choose to take that money to do good, or that's what the whole concept of a non-profit sets out to do. And when we register as a non-profit, we actually first register as a business with the ASIC, just like any other business, and we are a limited company, just like, you know, a range of other companies. So we are registered as a company. But what we sign up to do when we register as a non-profit is that we don't take that profit to a bunch of shareholders or to the owner or to a board or anywhere else. All that money will go and has to be measured and see that it has an impact somewhere in some people's life, or to serve animals or to do something else, whatever it is that your non-profit is about. So I like, for example, Simon Sinek, he says a non-profit should be called a for impact. Which I think might give a clearer message about what a non-profit does. Because yes, we are not to take our profit, but we can't do any impact, we can't do any good if we don't make a profit. So yes, there has to be a profit, pay the overheads, and then the extra money goes to do the good. So running a non-profit without having a business mindset is just as much set to fail as to run a shoe business without having a business mindset.
Yeah. So important, such an important message to get across to people, because I think that there's a lot of people who do think that, well, I should just get it for the cost rather than thinking about the profit. And I think that I'm really what I'm liking seeing is that there are actually more businesses out there that aren't necessarily non-for-profits, but they are about creating impact. And I think that we are closing the gap between profitable business, and not just profitable business, but non-for-profit profitable businesses and non-for-profits, because there is so much more of a push now, or not just a push, but a desire in people, especially with the in the growth of the entrepreneurial world. There's a greater desire for businesses to think about the impact, and whether it's a smaller impact that's going to have a ripple effect, or whether it's an impact that is actually, creating some massive global change.
Absolutely, because we see now a lot of social enterprises, we see B Corps, we see a lot of hybrid, ways of supporting good. And I think that is fantastic. A lot of ways, because sometimes, for example, if you have a company but I also want to do some good, but I can't figure out how to do it. And that's where a lot of collaboration and partnerships can be created, where it's like, oh, your non-profit really aligns with my values, really align with something that can align with the product I'm selling, or, it could be somebody, I know, for example, some people I met, they constructed this thermo water cup to keep your drink cold, but then they're also aligning with the non-profit building wells somewhere in Southeast Asia. So because their product and their non-profit idea is aligned, so they could partner up with another company that was specialized in and had an ability to do the water wells in Southeast Asia. And that's where they had traveled, and that was where their heart was and their passion was. So in that sense, that was a perfect partnership. And for me, that is where we should, in the future, see many more collaborations. Everybody has heard about Who Gives a Crap. It's not like the guy who owns or runs Who Gives a Crap. He doesn't go out and build toilets himself. He has partnered with an organization who are specialized in that and funds that organization. So it's all about collaborating, finding people that has aligned values, and where there's a story to tell together, where the product and the non-profit bit has something to say together.
Yeah, and that's so important. And I think that when you look at this more collaborative model, it really plays to the whole moving towards feminine leadership, which is that collaborative, less hierarchical, less patriarchal, I suppose, model, where we're moving towards this more collaborative approach rather than separation, and competition between different organizations. So it's so nice to see more and more collaborative projects happening between businesses and between non-for-profits or just community projects.
Yes, both both the more, I guess, more feminine way of running it. You're right, and also seeing, just smoothing out the gaps between non-profits over here and corporate world is over here, but smoothing the gaps, definitely, because I do believe we're all here for the same purpose. Yes, we all want to earn money. We also all want, the world to be a pleasant place for us to live and for our children to live.
Yeah, of course. So that is a fantastic segue into your children, because it's a world for your children to live.
Yes.
So you, as I said in the very beginning, that this is Neurodiversity Awareness Week, and you have 3 out of your 4 kids which are neurodiverse. And I would like for you to share some of your insights into the lives of neurodiverse children, as well as parenting neurodiverse children. And maybe even thirdly, how maybe your working with people in third world countries and vulnerable people has maybe helped you with your parenting journey with, I suppose, a vulnerable children.
Yes, there's a lot of parallels to do there, but so to start with, I have two children living with me at the moment, so they're 8 and 9, And one has ADHD, the other one is being assessed, or potentially has ADHD, but definitely has severe anxiety and some OCD traits, and which creates some struggles where other children might not have struggles, or it creates some emotional outbursts where others might not see as many. For example, my oldest daughter, often, you would never notice that anything was wrong because she saves all of it. She keeps on the mask throughout school time, but then comes home and then just falls. It all falls apart. The mask falls off, and often it's anger, it's frustration, it's all these things all in one that just comes out. So, it's very true that sometimes, the ones you love the most, they get all the hatred, because if you can't verbalize, if you don't have the word for, I feel very frustrated, or I feel anxious because so and so, then it often comes out as anger, because how else can I find an outlet for this? And for me, who has never dealt with anxiety myself, it has been definitely a learning journey for me. And it's like, oh, just pull yourself together. That's not really going to help, because that is so not in her capabilities at the moment. I am the holder of her emotions. I have to regulate her emotions for her and show her the way of how to harbor emotions, and to figure out what is the appropriate reaction to a certain incident. We don't need to send out the ambulance and the fire truck and whatever police cars for every little minor thing. Maybe a smaller response would also be okay now and again. Yes, because otherwise we have fire trucks quite a lot.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, so it is very challenging at times, and there's days where, I run low in capacity. But we now have a rule also here at home. We can call out like, I just can't have capacity right now. I can't hold your emotions. I don't have any space to hold your emotions right now. Can you give me 5 minutes? I will walk around the block with my dog or whatever. I will come back, and then I'll be ready to hold your emotions, but I can't hold them right now. And that's the first time, I think my daughter, she looked at me and was like, oh my God, what do you mean? What do you mean you can't? Like, no, I mean, at 5 minutes, then I can. And it's now a thing. So yeah, okay, we will wait 5 minutes, and it gives me enough time to just breathe and to, okay, I need now to step in and be there for her, because she can't do it just yet. The ultimate goal is, of course, to teach her to do these skills on her own. But for now, I have to help her, just like you have to help another child with math, or you have to help another child to ride their bike. It is just a learning process. It's a helping tool that she just needs more than somebody else.
Yeah, and that's I mean, what an incredible tool. And it is important. It just shows such effective communication to be able to, for you not to lose yourself, and the frustration and anger and all those things I'm sure you feel at different moments coming out, but you're role modeling that regulation, and that is a way of teaching, isn't it, to role model Absolutely. That and then effectively communicate for you to do that. And one time I'm sure that she'll use that exact same tool in her life when she's hoping to start to do that. And I love the way that you reframe that, to comparing it to, say, if they're not good at maths and you help them with maths, because we so often expect that we need to teach kids to self-regulate by allowing them to self-regulate. Mm. And it is true that some just struggle to do that. And whether it's because they've got, because they're neurodiverse on some level of the spectrum, whether it's, diagnosed or just some slight symptoms, they just don't seem to be able to do it. And yes, you can continue to set them up to try and practice until they get there. But if they're really struggling to do that, I can imagine that if you're setting themselves up to do that, you're probably chipping away at their self-worth so much that the detrimental effect and the long run and the ripple effect of that is probably going to be worse than you helping them regulate. And I think that that's such a mindset thing. And I love that, the way that you've related that to maths or another subject, which other people have probably done. But when you said that, I started to think, yeah, like, it's, someone can't do maths, they're not, okay, you get them a tutor, you get them help.
Yeah, exactly.
And why can't we look at emotional intelligence in that same way?
Exactly. And it's like my other daughter, she has inattentive ADHD. I didn't even know that it's now been categorized in different,
what is it called?
Inattentive ADHD. So she has a rich inner world. She's not the hyper, the stereotypical hyper boy that climbs the walls and can't sit still. No, she's completely opposite. She can sit still for hours and hours, but she's disappearing into her inner world. It's like, and if she's, without medication and on herself, she's quite happy. And you will hardly notice that she's there. But in her own little world, there's all sort of things that happens, and she can look at, oh, look, my hand. And, I remember when she was 2, we were in Tanzania, and she went to a British, kindy, and they was like, oh, so what do you do to discipline her? Because nothing we do is working. They had a little yellow mat that they sort of sat the 2-year-olds on for 30 seconds to tell them that you can't do whatever. And she would just sit there and enjoy it, because oh, I can sit here and I can look at my toes and I can look at that leaf, and it didn't touch her. She could sit there for hours and that wouldn't bother her whatsoever, because she has such a rich world on the inside of her. And sometimes it has really opened my eyes to all these other things that happens within her. She's like this box of chocolates. I never know what comes out, and this amazing person that is in there. And I just get to see snippets of now and again when something comes out. The biggest problem we had was then when she started going to school, because that didn't catch her attention, like writing, and it's like, oh, you have to sit still and concentrate and focus on something she didn't naturally find interesting and didn't have, why would I want to learn to write? That can't really be bothered. So it was so hard for her to get anything written down on paper. So we did start with medication, and that has been a big game changer for us. It has given her the ability to excel at school. She's gone from hardly being in the middle mainstream to be at the top level in every subject in her class. But she can also then choose, when it's not school days, she chooses not to have medication. And I give her that choice herself, because she's the one who can feel it on her body. So if it comes Saturday and Sunday, she can then choose herself. And some days, if she has to go somewhere or she has special ballet practice or whatever, yes, she will choose to have medication. But other than that, it's no, I want to feel like myself. And that, I think that is so amazing that she has the knowledge and the maturity to do so. And I also believe in giving her the freedom to choose herself, because ultimately I want to teach her she's in charge of her body. It's her body. She's the only one who can tell me how she's feeling.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing your personal story with about your family and your daughter, because it's really enlightening, isn't it? And everybody deals with these sort of things in very different ways. And vulnerable and neurodiverse children is becoming more and more common within families. And whether it's who knows for the reason, there's probably multiple reasons, and that could be a whole nother conversation. But the way that you've dealt with that is such a great balance. But it also, I suppose, like when you were talking about the problems, the health issue problems in Africa early, and I felt so heartbroken. In a way, hearing that also breaks my heart a little bit, because when you described her and her inner world, I just think, wow, successful creative entrepreneur. She's got so much to offer this world, where when we leave school, it's like we're wanting people, I look in the adult business world now and the entrepreneurial world, and it's like, let's unlearn everything and let's relearn. And here we are with someone who's got those incredible attributes to be such a success in her own right. And yet we've got to because of the system that we live in, and because of the, I suppose the, what's the word? I've just gone blank. But I've just gone blank. But the what's we're expected and how we're expected to be.
Yeah, the stereotyping of like everybody has to fit into this box.
And the status quo, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Because of the status quo, we've basically having to get her to change to fit into a system that isn't necessarily advancing our uniqueness, which we then sit as me as a life coach is really trying to get people back to themselves so that they can embrace their uniqueness. So it sort of breaks my heart. I'm heartened to watch how beautifully you mother her and the choices you're giving her and those opportunities to be so open-minded, to allow for both the more alternative way and the more mainstream way. And I love that. And I love that you're doing that. But at the same time, I also feel so sad that we're in a system that that you're having to do that.
Yes. So for me, it's about finding that balance, because I can't change, like we do need to learn to write and to do some math. So for me, that was all I needed her to be able to do at that point, when I realized, 45 minutes, and she, with lots of tears and coercion, she had one word on a paper, one word. And now, of course, a lot more happens. So for me at that state, when I saw only one word after 45 minutes, was like, okay, she just needs to be able to learn to write and to add some numbers. She has all of this creativity and things in her mind. She would be okay. But because our world is how it is, I will also do her a disservice if I just let her be. So it's finding the balance between of being able to adult in this world, or to be a person in this world, as well as not trotting down who she is. Finding that balance. And for me, it has also been really important being open about this whole journey, which is something like I've really realized a lot of people struggle with being open about their own issues. So after the first year I was here in Australia, I wrote something on Facebook, on my Facebook page, about the journey and how troublesome it had been, with realizing there was ADHD and anxiety and whatever. But because it was so important for me to tell, so people, I didn't have a network here. At times my daughter would break down in a panic attack in the middle of the park, and we just had to sit on the grass for 20 minutes with her screaming unarticulated for 20 minutes. So to not feel ostracized, to feel that I had at least the knowledge of the neighbors, of the people around, it was important for me to come out and be open about it. It's like, don't feel that you can't come near us. Don't feel that we are really strange or weird. This is what's happening. And yes, we are struggling. And some days it's just really tough. And some days we will walk home in tears. And, if you have it in you to give us a hug, it would be fantastic and appreciated. Or a pat on the shoulder, or whatever it is. Because some days are just hard.
Yeah. And it sounds like you're doing such an incredible job with all the work that you're doing, and single parenting kids that can be challenging at times. So maybe we've come almost to the hour point, which is, but we've talked about so many different things. So maybe what we can do is end on looking at the fact that you did say that you need to you were talking about the balancing with your daughter, about what the choices that you make for her. So maybe we can end by looking at your work-life blend as opposed to just balance, but the way that you blend your work and your life, because you are a solo parent of 4 kids. Obviously, some of them don't live here at the moment, but you're still in touch with them. You've got 2 neurodiverse ones that you're living with. You've got your own business. You're running the Artefactz. You're running the Australian division of the Cedar Tanzania company, non-for-profit, and you're studying. So, when you put all that together, a lot of mums and a lot of just people would be barely surviving, but you seem to be thriving. So what are some insights, some tips and some tools that you can give us? Like, what's your superpower?
I think my superpower is being really, really organized. And I think that is something I have learned from my children, because especially the oldest one, everything, she asked me, the night before, what is for dinner tomorrow? And to avoid the whole issues of breaking down and have the insecurity about what's for dinner for tomorrow, it's meal planning on a Sunday. So she has taught me that whole organization skill. So every day is broken down into 15-minute increments. We know exactly what we're doing and when we're doing it. And that also gives us, there's no procrastination, because no, that goes into that window. But it also gives us the flexibility. It's like, okay, if we're not doing that little box of things that is here, we can then move it over to this side of the whatever schedule. So it's not like we are really rigid. We just know that things takes this amount of time to do. So it's a lot of teamwork. It's a lot of organization. It's a lot of also working on unconventional times. For example, I work across time zones. So I work from home. I can then sort of take off my work from 3 o'clock or 3:30 when my children come home, do the afternoon activities and dinner with my children, but then I work again from 8 o'clock until 10. So I put in extra hours there because that's when I can have meetings with Tanzania, or I can communicate with people in different time zones. But at the same time, I have many people say, oh, but I would want to sit on the couch at that time. But it allows me to be off during the times when my kids do sports and ballet and swimming and all sorts of different times, and allowing me to be there for them in the afternoon so they don't have to go to after school care, for example.
Amazing. You're such an inspiration, Nina. It's unbelievable. And I think the thing you forgot to mention there, or you maybe not forgot, but that I think that you didn't mention about you, is your inclusivity mindset. And that mindset that you've got that has shown for your work in Africa, as well as being shown with your work with your children, is just having that real inclusivity mindset. And to me, that is something which is probably that complete acceptance of everybody where they are at any particular moment, and really take it in and make choices based on what is current and what can have a ripple effect going forward. And that's something that I can see in everything that you've shared today.
Thank you. I guess it's not something I am so aware of that is a thing, because that comes so natural to me. That is just me. That's just how I think, how I work, how my world functions. So yeah, it's not deliberate. I didn't mention it, but it was also, it's not a thing to me.
Yeah. And which is
I don't think I can't do it.
That's right. And which is why it's so beautiful and so real and so authentic. So it's an absolute honour and privilege to have this conversation with you today. So thank you so much for your time. And, I'm sure we could have a whole massive long conversation on the whole neurodiverse world of children and parenting. And I think it'd be really insightful for a lot of people. But unfortunately, we've sort of hit the hour mark, and I know that your time is precious with all that you do. So I'm going to leave the conversation there. And maybe you can let everybody know ways that they might be able to get in touch with you if they're really interested in the non-profit work that you do, or maybe they are interested to talk with you about the fact that they have kids that are neurodiverse and they're running out of ideas, and maybe you can inspire them as well. So if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way they can do that?
The best way, either reach out on Facebook or on Instagram, or look up on our website, australiaforcedartanzania.org, or on artefactz.org. My contact details are on both websites, as well as on social media. So just reach out. We're active all the time. I try to check in on all the messages at least once a day. So feel free to contact me on either platform.
Oh, fantastic. And I'll put all of your details on the show notes as well. So if you haven't written that down, just go to the show notes and all the details will be there. So thank you again, Nina. So it's been, as I said, such a pleasure and inspiration talking to you.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. So if you've listened to this conversation right to the end, I'm wondering what your biggest insight or takeaway is from today's conversation. If you can leave a comment and let us know, we would love to hear from you. If you'd like more information, as I said, you can go to Nina, as I'll put Nina's details on the show notes. And if you'd like any more information on me, you can visit me at any of my social media sites or channels, or you can go to my website at wellthyliving.com.au. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and consider subscribing to the Wellthy Living podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and on YouTube. So until next time, remember, connection is medicine.